Y seguimos adelante con nuestra dinámica en este Legal Tech Summit 2021, primera edición del Legal Tech Summit, y esta es la segunda jornada en la cual tenemos una conferencia, un panel que será realizado en inglés y que lleva como título Digital Checks and Promissory Notes, Lessons Learned and Their Future. Este es un panel en el cual van a conversar Alfonso Ugarte, él es abogado, desde Chile nos acompaña, socio de Cuatro Casas, docente y asesor en numerosos sectores, como les decía, es docente en Derecho Comercial en la Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. También está por allí Carlos Eduardo Azevedo, desde Brasil, socio de Pinheiro Neto, trabaja en el área de Insurance and Reinsurance, con énfasis en operaciones de M&A, contratos y estructuración de plataformas de seguros. Milton Hernán Quez, desde Argentina, socio fundador de Quez Davus Ruiz, abogados, profesor en grado universitario, especialista en Derecho de Daños y Contratos. También Simón Weisrup, de Uruguay, gerente senior en Ferrer, en el área de tecnología y digitalización del negocio. Ha sido auditor y consultor en el área financiera. Es experto en normativa contable bancocentrista. Sebastián Ramos, de Uruguay, abogado, socio de Ferrer, forma parte del Departamento de Banca y Finanzas, experto en contratos, especializado en redacción y negociación de acuerdos complejos, máster en Derecho en la University of Chicago. Y desde Suiza nos acompaña Benjamin Leisinger, partner at Hamburger. He is a partner in both the banking and finance and the capital market teams. He regularly advises in financial transactions, and in particular in the capital markets and regarding regulatory matters. Así que welcome, bienvenidos, los saludamos a todos. Esta conferencia será realizada, como les decía, en inglés, así que you are very welcome. Thank you for sharing this conference, this panel with us. And Sebastián, it's your turn to start the panel.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And thank you very much to the Legal Tech Summit and to Agustina Perez Comenale for inviting us to taking part of this conference. Also, thank you to all of you who have joined us, and a special thank to the panelists, to the great panelists that we have today, that I am sure they will enrich us with thoughts and with thinking. As you may see from the name of this session, the idea is to talk about electronic checks and electronic promissory notes. And the reason why we're doing this is because this year, the Uruguayan Parliament has received two bills of law which are trying to regulate e-checks and e-promissory notes. And there is a huge technological challenge for this, although both bills of law want to regulate and to give e-checks and e-promissory notes the same validity and the same force as regular checks and regular promissory notes. They don't say how this will be accomplished in reality. In the case of the e-checks, although the e-checks is being validated by the same bill of law, it then states that the circulation, the compensation, the guaranteeing, the endorsement, the assignment, and even the foreclosure of the e-checks will need to be regulated by the Central Bank of Uruguay, but it doesn't say how this will be accomplished, technologically speaking. And in the case of the promissory notes, is the same case. The bill of law states that it will recognize e-promissory notes, the circulation, the foreclosure, the assignment, the endorsement, etc., but only as long as those activities are done in a reliable method. Says the bill of law that guarantees the security and the identity of the promissory notes. But again, the law doesn't say what this reliable method means. And therefore, the idea of the panel of this session is to talk with these experts that we have here to see how their own countries and their own legislations have dealt with this, in order to give us some thoughts and to understand the disadvantages, advantages, and challenges that we have in Uruguay when these bills of law hopefully are passed as laws. So maybe I can start with Simon. Sorry, one thing about the language. The panel will be given in English, but since some of the panelists are only fluent in Spanish and some of them are only fluent in English, we will speak in English and Spanish in both ways. So just to give you a heads up. So Simon, you have been working together with the Central Bank of Uruguay in the digitalization of the financial sector in Uruguay. So maybe you can give us, a thought about, how this technological disruption and the technological innovation, is taking place in the financial sector, and specifically with the means of payment. What is Uruguay, and what is the road that Uruguay wants to take ahead about digitalization and payment methods?
Gracias, Sebastián. Buen día para todos. Bueno, Uruguay viene transitando un camino ascendente en la digitalización de la actividad financiera. Básicamente, esto se debió a un hecho por la promulgación de la Ley de Inclusión Financiera en 2014, donde todas aquellas personas que recibían remuneraciones en un sentido muy amplio de algún tipo, deben hacerlo a través de una cuenta bancaria o un instrumento de dinero electrónico. Esto resultó, lógicamente, en un incremento en la bancarización y sobre todo en la inclusión financiera de la población en Uruguay. De hecho, este hecho hizo que se dispararan las transacciones con tarjetas de débito, y en 2018 pasó que estas transacciones con tarjetas de débito superaron a las de tarjetas de crédito. Por otra parte, también se fue incrementando las transferencias electrónicas diferidas, ¿sí? Que ya hace unos años, y en este último año entendemos que debido a la pandemia tuvo también un incremento en la cantidad de operaciones. Por otra parte, un hecho importante, ahora en este mes de junio se lanzó al mercado las transferencias instantáneas en Uruguay. Un hecho relevante, es incipiente, todavía se puede operar solamente de 9 a 17 horas, pero bueno, sabemos que en la región estamos un poco relegados, porque digamos, Chile, Argentina, Brasil ya han implementado estas transferencias, lo mismo Suiza. De cara al futuro, ¿sí? Entendemos importante mencionar que el Banco Central, a fines del año pasado, emitió una hoja de ruta del sistema financiero para 2021 y 2022, lo cual tiene una tendencia clara hacia la digitalización y marca determinadas oportunidades y desafíos para el ecosistema financiero y el ecosistema de medios de pago. Abre oportunidades para nuevos modelos de negocios y a su vez eficiencias para todos los participantes, incluyendo los clientes. Algunos de esos puntos de la agenda que son importantes destacar, donde hay una tendencia marcada en la digitalización que va a Uruguay, son la implementación de transferencias inmediatas, como les dije, que recién acaban de implementarse acá en Uruguay, las transferencias de débitos directos o adeudos. Se va a implementar también, o está previsto, la multiadquirencia con respecto a transacciones con tarjetas de crédito y de débito. Como bien decías, Sebastián, el cheque electrónico también es uno de los proyectos, donde está el proyecto de ley que se envió al Parlamento. Y bueno, hay algo bien disruptivo que está pasando, yo creo que en todas las economías del mundo, y se está dando en el sector financiero, es la implementación del modelo de banca abierta. O sea que estamos hablando de una tendencia mundial hacia la digitalización, en la cual la velocidad en implementar estos cambios hacia la digitalización es diferencial por país. Hay múltiples variables que determinan esta velocidad. Una de ellas es la regulación, ¿sí? Que bueno, que entendemos que para un sistema financiero, dado el rol en la economía de un sistema financiero, dado la participación en los mercados de crédito y en la cadena de pagos, es importante y es muy delicada el tema de la regulación. Entonces entendemos que Uruguay va inequívocamente hacia una digitalización de su sistema financiero.
Thank you, Simón. Alfonso, Simón said that, but it is a reality that in South America, Chile is seen as a country with a very developed financing and securities market. So maybe you can share with us what is your view on how Chile is doing with payment methods and bankability.
Sure. So it's very interesting hearing what Simon is saying, because I think we are a bit further down the track. We're still not there, you know, as other countries with everything fully instant and digitalized. But to give you an example, last year, checks in terms of volume were only a third of the transactions when you compare them with credit card transfers and instant wire transfers. And in terms of number of transactions, credit card transfers and wire transfers surpass checks for 100 times in number of transactions. So what you're seeing now is that the use of checks is decreasing, and there is a growing trend in terms of the use of instant wire transfers and payment, mainly because when you use a check, at least as we conceive it in Chile, you still run some sort of credit risk related to, you know, the lack of funds in the account and the clearing, and these other systems are competitive because they give you that. So what is happening in Chile is that digital payment methods have evolved, mainly grounded in the concept of the digital credit cards, and now there is a consultation opened that is very focused on basically the clearing system for payment methods. And what you see is that the regulation is moving towards a functional concept and less of, you know, what is the support of the method, whether it's a check, whether it's a transfer, whether it's what the regulator in Chile is trying to achieve is to get more competition and clearing protocols and methods that allow any means of payments to be cleared and processed in the financial system. It's very focused on that rather than on which method and you use and why.
Excellent. Thank you, Poncho. And now moving specifically to e-checks, Simon. Since you have been working together with the Central Bank of Uruguay, what opportunities and challenges are you seeing, you know, in this process that Uruguay is starting to take?
Como decía Alfonso, el cheque, las grandes oportunidades que vemos con el cheque electrónico es, bueno, los menores costos asociados que va a tener, porque como bien decía Alfonso, o sea, la actividad del clearing, el portar una libreta de cheques físicas, todos esos costos van a bajar. Esperamos también que, bueno, acá en Uruguay, quizás luego Alfonso nos dice cómo funciona en Chile y en las otras, en Brasil, en Argentina, esos costos que hay ahorros de costos se van a transferir, deberían transferirse a los precios, con lo cual eso va a permitir que determinados segmentos, por ejemplo las pymes, que están un poco relegadas acá en Uruguay en el acceso al financiamiento, puedan tener una ventaja en poder utilizar este método de cheque electrónico. También, bueno, hay temas de que mejora la seguridad en cuanto a no portar un título valor físico, disminuyen los riesgos operativos, hay un endoso sin límites, es decir, ya no necesitamos tener más papel para poder endosar el mismo cheque. Y bueno, también hay una disminución en los riesgos operativos en cuanto a que el cheque esté mal emitido, es decir, hay infinidades de ventajas para todos los actores y también para los clientes del sector financiero. Como desafíos, lógicamente la implementación tiene que ser un proceso intuitivo, simple, sin fricciones para los clientes. También está el tema de la ciberseguridad, que hay que tener mucho cuidado con ese aspecto en el cheque electrónico. Otro aspecto, los últimos dos aspectos que quiero mencionar como principales son el registro y la trazabilidad del cheque, ¿sí? Y sobre todo el respaldo de dichas operaciones digitales, porque, bueno, ante un reclamo o ante una disputa entre un cliente y un banco, bueno, o los actores que se den, la tecnología debe responder en ese caso para justamente demostrar cómo se trazó, cómo se efectuó esa operación digital.
Gracias, Simón. Milton, in Argentina, there is already a law that regulates electronic checks. Can you give us your view and especially the experience that you have seen since the passing of the law?
Ok, bueno, buenos días Sebastián y al resto de los compañeros del panel. Efectivamente, bueno, obviamente la regulación de cheques es bastante vieja o tiene muchos años ya. Lo que se hizo no fue sacar una nueva ley de cheques, sino lo que se produjo es un ayornamiento, una adaptación de la ley para admitir el fenómeno desmaterializado, digamos, electrónico, ¿no? El cheque electrónico. Es importante resaltar que en nuestro país solamente en títulos de crédito el único, digamos, título de crédito electrónico es el cheque, todavía el pagaré no está implementado. La ley entró en vigencia, digamos, en junio del 2018, pero debido al reacomodamiento que se tuvo que generar en las diversas entidades bancarias y obviamente que la nueva, digamos, el nuevo sistema pueda ramificarse y penetrar en los distintos mercados y usuarios, hubo que ir posponiendo su entrada en vigencia, ¿no es cierto? Tal es así que recién el 28/6 del 2019, mediante algunas disposiciones del Banco Central que fueron prorrogando la entrada en vigencia, recién ahí comenzó la vigencia de esto. Obviamente que es bastante nuevo, apenas tenemos quizá un año y medio o un año de vigencia, pero la experiencia ha sido muy positiva en muchos aspectos y quizá algunas notas negativas que quizá después se las puedo contar en base a experiencias personales, ¿no? Pero sí, en base a lo que decía Simón, comparto los beneficios que nos ha traído esto y le agregaría algunos más. Bueno, uno tiene que ver en cuanto al plazo de ejecución, perdón, de operatividad del cheque, la forma en que podemos diferir la obligación es de un año, es decir, en nuestro caso es igual que el cheque físico, pero bueno, lo que hemos ganado es en operatividad, porque obviamente podemos operar los 365 días del año, las 24 horas, no hay una limitación horaria, puedo endosar un cheque, todo es electrónico, el endoso es electrónico, lo puedo hacer a las 10 de la noche, a las 12, a cualquier hora. Creo que también deberíamos bueno, reforzar lo que decía Simón también en cuanto a la imposibilidad de extraviarlo, ¿no? Lo llevamos en nuestros celulares, en nuestro home banking, y eso genera que aumenta la seguridad, también evita que se roben, o incluso a veces maniobras fraudulentas, el extravío de cheques que a veces es usado también para evitar digamos, una falta de fondos, ¿no? Creo que también nos redunda en beneficio de costos. La despapelización obviamente es un costo que quizá a escala individual es despreciable, pero en gran escala creo que no debe ser despreciable. Mayor agilidad en el proceso de la compensación. El sistema de compensación de cheques, que también era físico, ahora es electrónico. En nuestro país se creó una institución que se llama COELSA, que es la Cámara Compensadora Electrónica, que se hace la compensación electrónica y eso también permite ganar tiempos, ¿no? Creo que también podríamos resaltar como un beneficio que no es menor, es el achicamiento de los motivos de rechazo por cuestiones formales de los cheques. Un número que está mal, una firma o que está mal inserta o fuera de los cuadros, ¿no? Creo que eso también genera la disminución de rechazos por motivos formales. Y otro beneficio que nosotros hemos visto y que la verdad que se ha usado bastante es la posibilidad, que esto creo que depende de la regulación de cada país, ¿no? Pero la posibilidad de que si su destinatario no aceptó el cheque, el emisor pueda anularlo. Es decir, que podemos recuperar el cheque antes de que sea aceptado sin necesidad de mayor formalismo. Y por último, creo que es un gran tema que permite que el cheque sea negociado en el mercado de valores, lo cual quizá también evita quien tenga que hacer una operación de descuento, descontar un cheque, acudir a mercados negros o mercados informales, ¿no? Y por último, resalto también algo que dijo Simón, la posibilidad casi ilimitada de endosos, ¿no? Digo casi ilimitada porque nuestro país tiene un límite de 100 endosos. De cualquier forma es bastante improbable que alguien haga más de 100 endosos, sería un título extremadamente volador, ¿no? Así que bueno, en resumen, Sebastián, creo que esas son quizás las fortalezas que hemos visto en la implementación de este sistema.
Buenísimo. Thank you very much, Milton. And later you will tell us about the challenges or the disadvantages of the HX. Now I would like to move to Poncho. Do you think, given what you said about the quantity of payment methods done without checks, that an e-check will be competitive in Chile, Poncho?
My view is that not really, because there's one key aspect in Chile that differs from Argentina and from what I understand in Uruguay, which is that you cannot date checks. Checks are not a means to record a debt. They're only a payment means. If you date a check, the check can be collected, even if it's dated after the issuance date. So, and that is very key because it really does not develop a market for endorsement, for discount operations. So basically the check is a payment means that ends up competing with credit cards, debit cards, e-wallets, prepayment cards. And in that market, I don't think it's going to be competitive because the other ones offer instant payment confirmation. So I think there we have a very important regulation difference that changes completely the paradigm in terms of the role of the check. To record debts, you would have to go to the note, which we can talk later in the panel, but that's a key difference.
Exactly. Thank you, Poncho. And Cadu, what is the status of e-checks and e-promissory notes in Brazil?
Hi, Seba. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity of talking to you and learning a lot from the different jurisdictions. Both of them, electronic checks and checks in general and promissory notes, are named credit bonds in Brazil or credit instruments. Those are specific kinds of bonds that basically have the advantage of skipping the cognizance phase, and you go straight to enforcement procedure in Brazil. So that's the main advantage in what you try to preserve whenever you have a credit bond, because simply it takes too long to litigate if you need to go to the cognizance phase. And there is a specific chapter in the Brazilian Civil Code about the credit bonds. This specific chapter was changed. However, the credit instruments, the credit bonds, they are also ruled by different regulations. And these other regulations need to be adjusted because they have a concept of documentary evidence that is placed in all those different ones that needs to be adjusted to the new times. The Civil Code is from 2002. So it's fairly new, let's say this, but it is already adjusted, but the other instruments are not. And the reality simply, takes over and things start to happen before these changes are implemented, because they also require, in some cases, specific systems to support, as we're hearing from other jurisdictions as well. So moving specifically to e-checks, we have a similar concept from the Chilean one. Check in Brazil is a payment on demand, is upon demand. So if you go to the bank, regardless of the date that's written, you're supposed to actually cash the check immediately, even if you post date or you include the date in the future. That's something that was a market practice in Brazil. It was simply a way to do it. You go to a store, there was no credit card, so people would just put next month and the next month and the next month as the dates, and there was a kind of a gentleman's agreement that no one would compensate or would offset, will require payment of the check before that. But if you went to court and tried to enforce, actually not even to court, if you went to the bank, you could already cash the check regardless of the date indicated. So it was a use that was more practical than actually supported by the legal system. And what happened is that with the electronic means of payments, in Brazil, because of the high inflation and things that we had a lot in the past, has a very efficient banking system for compensating for basically offsetting payments. And it had two instruments, the DOC and the TED, that was used a lot for transfers. And now we have the PIX. It is the new system for payments that is very effective, and you can do it anytime. Obviously, there are, for security reasons, there are some limits, but you can do at midnight, you can do in the morning, during the weekends. I mean, whenever you want, you can transfer funds, and that has been something that's taking over. So you see a lot of even e-commerce offering discounts if you pay by Pix, because then there is no fee for the the ones that you pay for the credit cards and those things. So I would imagine that checks in Brazil, and they have dropped, I think, something like 85% in the last 25 years. More recently, it's even stiffer, the drop. So I would expect, similarly to what's happening in Chile, that the check will have a restricted market, that will have its use, but it tends to be very, very limited, and replace it by credit cards and these electronic transfers. For the promissory notes, there is no replacement or changing in the specific regulations yet. This is still to happen. It's something that's happening with other credit notes or credit bonds. I would expect this to happen in the near future. But there are also precedents in the market of electronic versions that could be enforced. The issue is whenever you go straight to enforcement procedure, and then you face an issue. But even if you have a promissory note that doesn't follow all the requirements, it's still a document that you could take to the initial phase in the courts, and then basically create an enforcement title that then you will go through to the next procedure. Once we have the change in the regulations, then you don't need to go to this, or you don't have the risk of going to this first phase anymore. And if I needed to render an opinion on that, I would say that it is possible in the electronic ones. Perhaps you could enforce, but it will not be a clean opinion yet, and hopefully we'll be able to do that soon.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Kadu. And now moving to Switzerland, Benny, is it possible in Switzerland to have e-checks and e-promissory notes? And what is the market standard?
Well, to begin with checks first, checks are not used in Switzerland, or not really. They have lost their importance many years ago. As it was used, as you all said already, as a means of payment, but nowadays this is all replaced by debit cards, or even by an app payment function. In Switzerland, for example, there's one, it's called Twint. It's supported by the larger Swiss banks, and more than half of the Swiss population actually uses that means of payment. And if you know the number of half of the population, basically every adult uses this as a means of a payment. You can pay with it in a store, you can do business to business, customer to customer transfer, you can request money, etc. That's all done via the app, and in the background supported by the banks. So that's basically what's used as a means of electronic payment. And the whole idea of an electronic check or digital check is not really used. When it comes to the promissory notes, in 2010 in Switzerland, we introduced a bill. It's called the Intermediated Securities Act, in the way of which also basically mere digital bonds and shares and other securities were introduced. So by means of entering the first creditor, the number, the denomination in a even digital format, so say a Excel sheet, and sending that to the first creditor, you could validly issue a bond or a share. And the problem was that for the transfer of that right, you would have to use, or still have to use, a written assignment. So that at the end of the day, when someone claims requests the payment of this debt from you, you will have to show the chain of transfers by means of written evidence. This is not the case as soon as the securities are brought into the clearing system with, say, SIX SAS or another clearing system, and then it's credited into the securities account of one or more banks. Because then, at that point in time, it becomes completely digital, and transfers are only possible by means of a credit and a debit in this electronic securities account of the participating banks. And any other written transfer would not be valid. It would you would have to show that you have it in your bank account. So that's basically what we have for the basically 99% of all of the bonds issued by Swiss issuers, and largely all of the shares issued by Swiss issuers. So global certificates and individual certificates are no longer there. And to take it even further, you may have known that we had numerous initial coin offerings in Switzerland in the last years, that use the blockchain technology. And in this context, also, so-called asset tokens came into discussion, and the question of whether you can basically validly issue tokens that simply exist on the blockchain, and where the title can be transferred by means of a transfer on the blockchain. Because the blockchain has numerous benefits, as you know, because of every block added to the transaction, you have a perfect transparency from the issuance of this token to the ultimate holder. And for that reason, this year a law entered into effect that for basically any claim, and including any debt from private, for example, you could issue them on the blockchain.
Amazing. Thank you, Benny. And we'll come back to these new instruments that are currently in Switzerland, which are very interesting and which are very new to us, of course. And, but now moving forward to the issues or the challenges involved in e-checks and e-promissory notes, one of the main issues is about foreclosure, right? I mean, the first reason why you will have a promissory note or a check is because in case of default, you would like to access a fast judicial process in order to obtain a seizure of assets and try to collect your debt. In the Bill of Law regulating the e-checks in Uruguay, in case of non-payment, the bank will need to issue a certificate, and with that certificate, you go to the courts to start the foreclosure procedure. Obviously, this hasn't occurred in the reality yet, so I would like to ask Milton, who has a recent experience in foreclosing an electronic check, so that he can tell us what was his experience like.
Okay, bueno, primero deberíamos decir que hay un cambio profundo del sistema, que es de esperar que el sistema judicial, digamos, esta cuestión de que pueda tomarse un tiempo para lograr entender el sistema, pero en mi experiencia personal a nosotros nos tocó hacer la primera ejecución de un cheque judicial en nuestra provincia y fue un verdadero dolor de cabezas porque en el caso de no pago lo que hacen, está establecido que el banco debe emitir un certificado de acciones civiles que es en formato papel, con firma de 2 funcionarios. Y ese fue el primer problema que nos encontramos, ¿no? Un cheque que está pensado, como decía Benjamin, desde su aspecto de la seguridad, del uso del blockchain o de tecnologías que son muy efectivas a la hora de lograr su mayor seguridad, que tengamos que retroceder a la papelización, ir al banco, sacar un turno, que en contexto de pandemia es complejo, para que nos den un papel con firma de 2 funcionarios. Y bueno, y ese fue el primer dolor de cabeza que tuvimos, porque fuimos al banco donde se presentó para el cobro, el banco girado, y nos informan que el CAC, el Certificado de Acciones Civiles, había que pedírselo al banco emisor, que por ahí estaba en otra provincia, ¿no? Entonces, esta agilización o este agilismo que buscábamos terminó siendo un laberinto de dónde nos conseguimos esa acción civil para ese certificado de acciones civiles para poder avanzar con nuestra ejecución. Después de algunas idas y vueltas, logramos hacernos de ese certificado de acciones civiles y bueno, y fuimos al juzgado. El juzgado, que estaba acostumbrado a que adjuntemos un cartular, tardó más o menos un mes en sacarnos el primer proveído, porque tuvieron que verificar el certificado de acciones civiles, lleva un código que debe validarse a través del sistema web. No sé si validarse, pero sí verificarse a través de la web. Entonces, fue muy ralentizado todo ese proceso, pero no quiero ser muy ácido con la crítica, porque entiendo que fue la primera ejecución. Tengo la enorme expectativa de que con el fluir de los días esto se agilice. Pero la experiencia no fue buena, digamos, todo lo que ganamos en la agilidad comercial lo perdimos en la ejecución, y lo que a mí me quedó, la sensación, y de mi humilde experiencia y mi humilde lugar, quizá si están en una base regulatoria, aconsejar a quien esté en esa instancia que acoplen el sistema judicial al sistema comercial o bancario, pensando en qué pasa si el título de crédito no tiene fondos, ¿no? Digamos, que estén conectadas esas dos pequeños mundos, ¿no? De cualquier forma, quería ser respetuoso también por la crítica, porque entiendo que se está trabajando en un certificado de acciones civiles que también va a ser electrónico, junto con otras funcionalidades que va a ir adquiriendo con el tiempo, ¿no? Por ejemplo, no está permitido el endoso en blanco todavía, eso está previsto en unas segundas y terceras etapas lograrse, o incluso que alguien pueda cobrar un cheque, un e-check al portador por ventanilla, digamos. Son cosas que la implementación ha sido gradual, pero sí, digamos, en resumen, la experiencia judicial ha sido más tortuosa de ejecutar un cheque judicial que si hubiera sido ejecutar un cartular. La expectativa es que con el tiempo esto se agilice, pero bueno, volver a sacar turno para conseguir papeles con firma de funcionarios terminó siendo una burocracia extra que no existía antes con el sistema antiguo, ¿no? Así que bueno, esa fue un poco la experiencia.
Muchas gracias, Milton, and we hope that this gets solved in the future, as you said. And Poncho, how do you think this will be overcome in Chile?
So it's really interesting to hear Milton, because I think here we have a lot of problems in common. At the end of the day, when you talk about notes, which are the only ones that you can record debt in Chile, the consensus is that you can issue them digitally, but in order to apply for the expedited enforcement, you have to go to the notary public and digitally sign in front of him. So that defeats, the whole purpose of digitalization. It's absurd, that. So digital promissory notes have not penetrated because, as Milton said, what you need here is an undisputed instrument that allows you to apply for expedited enforcement. So, and there is a project for this. It's been 10 years in Congress, just to allow expressly the issuance of digital promissory notes. It's not out there. I think that it did pick up pace with the pandemic, and what that project does is that basically it relies on the digital signatures, the certified digital signatures, for all the acts you execute on the note, the issuance, the endorsement, and all sorts of endorsements. You replace basically the function of the notary public by the certified signature. I think that will work well because we have a good experience in Chile, because we've been doing this with invoices for, I think, 10 years now, or at least 5 years, digital invoices. So and those are, you can use them for expedited enforcement, and they're digitally signed, they're certified by authorized administrators of e-signatures, and they work, and they're enforced regularly in our courts, but we don't have the regulation yet. So when it's applied, I suspect it will work well, because we do have a very good experience with other sorts of documents.
Perfect. Thank you, Poncho. And Cadu, do you want to tell us how would you enforce these electronic instruments in Brazil?
Sure. So let's take the promissory notes as an example. And the issue is that we don't have the promissory notes on an electronic form yet, but we do have electronic signature for promissory notes. So you could have a promissory note that's signed electronically. And there is a specific certification in Brazil. It must follow a specific key, the ICP, Brazilian key, that with this certification, basically it's as if you were signing this document before a notary public. But this is different from a book promissory note, because it's indeed, a document in PDF form that you would electronically sign. It's basically it. And as long as you have the signature being placed as a certified signature with the appropriate keys, this is a valid document in Brazil that's enforceable, and you could go straight to enforcement procedure in Brazil. In the procedure itself, it is very similar to what we would have in with a paper promissory note. Because the procedures in courts are now digital, you will basically start the procedure and upload to the court system the promissory notes as you would do in using an actual paper promissory note, with obviously the other kind of certification that would require for the case of the paper promissory note. But in this case, you basically upload to the system and you proceed as if this was a regular procedure. So it is basically already mingled or already interacting with the existing system.
Perfect. Thank you, Cadu. Now, the last part of the panel, we would like to discuss other financial instruments that are being possible because of the new technology. And we know that in Switzerland we have the DLT-based securities, and in Brazil there are these CCBs, or Cédula de Crédito Bancario, the bank credit notes. And since those instruments are quite new, at least for Uruguay, I would like first Benny to tell us more about these DLT-based securities, whether there's a good reliability for the debtor and for the obligor, you know, on this registry that is created to book all the instruments. And in case of enforcement, how will the creditors claim their rights against the debtor?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think the whole idea of this legislation was to acknowledge what happens, in particular also in the Zug and what they call the crypto valley, and to put all of these electronic or digital rights or claims on a solid legal foundation. And so, as I already said, eligible underlyings are any type of claims against counterparties or even membership rights. So also shares, bonds, promissory notes, etc. You could all issue that on that blockchain by use of these DLT securities. So what does it require? First, the entering into a so-called registration agreement, and that does not require any wet ink signature or anything else. But the agreement must be concluded at the latest at the point the first creditor acquires this right. And the part of this transfer agreement must be part of the code. So it must be part of the smart contract or the code that basically provides for that basically is the basis of this digital right. And second, there are certain requirements on the register by means of which these rights are registered and transferred. So this registration agreement says how it's issued and how they can be transferred, and this register has to meet certain requirements. And the requirements are such to ensure that it's not subject to fraud or any other extra risk. Of course, you have hacking and you have other issues that you generally have in the digital world, but it must guarantee a certain security when it comes to changing the code, etc. And that is why one of the elements that the register has to meet is that it has to give the creditors the right to transfer the right, but not the debtor. The debtor basically can only watch who actually holds this, but cannot influence whether a right is transferred or not. So the creditors have to change it. Second, appropriate technical and organizational means that are also described in the registration agreement have to ensure that it's basically not subject to changes by third parties. And the way it's typically done is by using a consensus protocol. So all of the aspects that you typically see on the blockchain, be it a proof of work, be it proof of stake or other means, there must be a consensus protocol where the transactions are basically approved. And all of these concepts, they say that code is the law, that cannot be changed and certainly not by the issuer. So there are certain requirements. The legislative materials clearly state both permissionless and permissioned blockchains such as Ethereum or Corda, or they mention certain types of codes that can be used that guarantee that function. So they would work as a means of technical procedure for the digital register. Another important thing is that the law provides for that the debtor when it makes the payment, it's validly satisfies the claim by whoever, according to the register, currently holds that right, irrespective of whether this person is actually entitled or not. So you can completely rely on the record because of this requirement that it should not be subject to change. The same is if you, on the register, acquire such a digital right, a digital note, for example, you are protected as long as you acted in good faith. So we have all of these protection mechanisms that you do not have to care whether this person was entitled or not. As soon as you get it on the register, that's perfectly fine. It's also the law specifically provides for a rule in the case of a bankruptcy of the debtor, in the case of transfers, for example. So if one creditor transfers the right on the register and then falls into bankruptcy, as long as this transfer was made prior to the opening of the bankruptcy, the transfer was valid. So there are various elements in the law that ensure that basically this whole system is established and that it works. And everything must be transparent. So the creditors must have the opportunity to access the data and so on, which is an important point to what you refer to what do you do in front of the court. So whenever at the end of the day the debtor does not pay, you basically have to enforce this claim one way or the other. And the way you would do it in Switzerland is you would open debt enforcement proceedings, which are relatively easily possible in Switzerland. You do not have to show at that point in time that you have a claim. You can just file it with the debt enforcement register. And then the debtor will have to say, no, I don't owe this. And then it gets to a court proceeding where you can then basically get a title to execute against, other assets in the real world that this person has. And there, the register in electronic form is eligible evidence. And the same the definition under the Code of Civil Procedures of a certificate and other valid proof includes electronic data. So depending on who's the presiding judge, they may be able to do it themselves. In most of the cases, they will most likely appoint court-appointed experts that will then access the register digitally and confirm to the court that the claimant basically holds this right in the register.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Benny. I don't know if we have time for Cadu to tell us at least a little bit about the CCBs.
Sure. This is fairly easy. It's just an example of what was implemented in Brazil in July 2020. The Brazilian Central Bank changed the regulations specifically to CCBs. It is basically a bank credit instrument that is associated with a certain transaction. So it's kind of collateral to a transaction, and it basically allowed for a book entry bank credit notes. So basically you have the registration as a book entry instead of actual paper. And this was it required, we participated in the firm in this process with the Brazilian Central Bank and provided the elements of what needed to be changed in the regulations. And with the change in the regulation, it became a reality. You go straight to enforcement and you don't need to have the actual print or to have the document signed on electronic form. You just go through the entries in the books of the bank and the system, and you move straight. So it's a good example of what needs to happen in Brazil with the other credit instruments, so that we can have a fully electronic, and like seeing what Benny was mentioning, because it is the future. It's what we're heading to. There are important changes happening in Brazil as well, not only in relation to banking, but in insurance as well, to basically integrate the markets. And you mentioned in the beginning the open finance or open banking with open insurance, and the blockchain and all these connections happening with protocols and with conventions that would allow for a lot of stability and basically overcome the issues that people start having once they move into the electronic form, would probably be sufficed by these instruments or these practical technologies that will allow for the same level of comfort that we had in the past. And in my opinion, even more, because now it's recorded in blockchain and it's much more secure in terms of chains.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Cadu. I see that we ran out of time, but we managed to cover all the things that we wanted to say. Nothing, just a big thank you to all of you guys that made this possible. And I hope you enjoyed as much as I did, and that you learned as much as I did. And hopefully in the next Legal Tech Summit, we will see each other again.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. It was
everybody.
great seeing
It's
you
been
all.
great.
Thank you everybody. Bye bye.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody. Muchas gracias a todos. Obrigado también. Me encantan estos paneles internacionales y realmente toda la información que pudieron compartir dentro de este tiempo. Muchísimas gracias. A Alfonso, a Benjamin, a Carlos, a Milton, a Simón y a Sebastián. Adelanto. Ahora vamos a ir a una pequeña pausa. Y algo muy importante también que ya lo había comentado, pero agradecemos a Ferrer Abogados, por supuesto, que presentó este panel.